I'd like to welcome everybody to the October 20th, 2015 morning work session of the school board. Our first topic is restorative strategies. Ms. Superintendent?
About, it must have been 4 or 5 years ago, I had representatives from SURE, which is Sarasota United for Equity and Responsibility, came and they spoke to me about a program that they would like to see in our school district called Restorative Justice. Restorative Justice had demonstrated gains primarily in the DJJ system of having alternatives for students and was being used in educational arenas with the idea of something to do in lieu of out-of-school suspension. And so it was an area of interest on our part as well, that we would always like to look at new ways of working with our students to keep them in school and not out of school. And so began a journey to learn more about it. We had some pilot programs at Emma E. Booker and Booker Middle, and had some challenges in finding the right resource for some training. But then learned that the state of Minnesota was actually looking at restorative strategies, restorative practice in conjunction with positive behavior support, which we saw that was the link we needed to really integrate it with the system that we were already using in our school district. So we sent Tanis Knopf there to learn, and Rex Ingrich to learn more about it in Minnesota. We actually used some of their trainers. They were very open and wanting to share what they had learned. And we went to the next step and involved even more elementary schools, primarily looking at starting at the elementary level. Well, it has continued to grow exponentially, and we're hearing some really positive impacts where it is getting a new set of tools for our teachers and setting a culture for all of their students, using a circle, community circle type of strategy that's really having an impact both on managing behavior issues, but also in the academic arena as well. So we're seeing how it's so well integrated with what we're doing, and it actually brings it to a new level. So I've asked Tanis Knopf and Rex Ingrich here today to begin to really help you understand the shift that we're seeing in this arena in our school district. So Tanis and Rex.
We appreciate this opportunity to catch you up to date on this project that initiative we've put in place a couple of years ago as it continues to grow. As the superintendent mentioned, it's the Sarasota United for Responsibility and Equity group, the SURE group, that brought this to us. So today I've asked them, they know they can't speak, but they came all this way to sit so we could introduce you to them and thank them for bringing us this wonderful model. So SURE group, would you please stand? They've been very generous with their support and their time. We update them monthly. They have us come report to their large community group on a regular basis, and they provide a lot of support to us as we implement this model. Another thing I want to mention before we begin our presentation is that we were fortunate enough to write and be awarded, as you know, because you approved it, the AmeriCorps Vista grant from the federal government. And that grant brings to us up to 5 Vista workers for a maximum of 3 years to come and work, help us develop and grow and evaluate this program. And today I asked, we have 3 of our Vistas on board already. A 4th will join us in November. And I asked our Vistas to join us, if you all would please stand up. We have Nolan Ruark, Tomas Laster, and Dil Robitaille. And the neat thing is that they are all recent graduates of New College. And they came to this project already with the mindset and the personal beliefs about the design of restorative strategies. So they've moved right in with us on this. They're very helpful. They'll be out in the schools and helping us build capacity, and we're very, very grateful for them being with us. And if you know about AmeriCorps Vista, it's like the Peace Corps for the United States. You get no money for doing a lot of work. So they are very dedicated with us. And I would like to also thank Amy Donner, who led us in writing the VISTA grant. She found it for us. And if you don't know about Amy, what a gem we have in this district. I've been at the university long enough to know what it's like to write grants. And she actually makes it fun and manageable. So we're really appreciative because it gives us even more support for this project. As Lori mentioned, she had the foresight to see that bringing restorative strategies as an enhancement to our already in place positive behavior support was the way to go, not only to improve that program, but to bring something to the teachers and to the staff that wasn't one more thing on top of everything else. And it's blended into positive behavior support. Rex is from People Support Services, and if you don't know, he is the lead in the positive behavior support program, so it was a natural fit. And the other piece of insight I'd like to mention to you before we start our little PowerPoint is that Lori's vision was to build a train the trainer model. So we do have sustainability in the district. We have 8 individuals, 7 guidance counselors, and 1 teacher trained as district level trainers. So we'll always be able to do this training with staff that we have on board. We don't have to go out and pay big fees for consultants on a regular basis. So with that kind of support shared, I'd like to go ahead and just run you through a brief PowerPoint. We'll wait till they pull it up for us. So we're just going to talk to you briefly about the why and the how that we're integrating restorative strategies with positive behavior support. We'll just do a little overview. We have a video for you, a brief video from a school, a high school in Colorado that's doing this, and then we'll tell you a little bit more about the details of our model in particular. So board members, in your read ahead, we did give you a definition of positive behavior support, and it's an approach where we're focusing on teaching and reinforcing positive behaviors. Restorative strategies, well, really, restorative justice is the program, as the superintendent shared with you. What we did is we analyzed our current positive behavior support strategies and determined which strategies from restorative justice would fit with what we needed, fill in the holes that we had, and enhance that practice. So the history of restorative justice is that it's really a set of principles and practices when applied in the schools help students learn problem solving, and then when a student behaves inappropriately, to go beyond holding the student accountable, but to a point where the student and the people who were harmed repair the harm, and it restores the community. So it goes beyond that punishment approach. Restorative justice has a long history based on values and practices throughout societies in the world. And the reasons that we decided to use the restorative strategies that we adopted, because overall, it increases student engagement, because naturally, if the student is in the classroom and engaged and not suspended, we're going to have a better chance to increase their academic strategies. So we talk about first building a safe learning environment. We didn't come in at the high school level at the deep end to try to do away or give alternatives for out-of-school suspension. With all of our research, and research that we are grateful to the VISTA folks for bringing to us, we learned that building that base, that safe base, and building from there up is the way to have a sustainable program. So first we have the teachers work with these strategies and other staff members to provide a safe learning environment. And when students are fearful, when they don't feel safe, they typically do 3 things, one of 3 things, or maybe all 3. They tend to flight. They tend toward flight. That's the natural human response to fear, flight. So we have kids who are truant. They don't come to school. They can freeze. They may be physically there, but they're so uncomfortable and so fearful, they're not mentally, cognitively engaged. Or they fight. That's what we always hear about, and that can result in removal from the classroom or in out-of-school suspension. This approach also is a proactive approach. It helps to prevent behavior problems. It includes giving the students a voice, a place where they feel safe to express their opinions in terms of making rules and procedures. They learn and practice empathy. And Rex will mention in a minute that we are more and more challenged in our society these days to have kids really know how to behave empathetically toward one another and toward others. And it also teaches students to engage in effective problem solvings in a real-life, real-time situation. So if something happens in the classroom, you might hear a teacher say, let's circle up and deal with the problem in that way, a safe way that's very structured, that's grounded in a proven strategy. And finally, this increase in student engagement comes about because this program can provide alternatives to out-of-school suspension while repairing the harm. So it's not that the student gets away with doing something that they shouldn't have done, but they are held responsible, and in that context, we repair the harm to the person who was the victim or the item that was the victim, and repairs harm that was involved with the community. So you might say, well, why should we do this? Where is it happening? It's growing. As Lori said, it started in the DJJ system, but it seems to be really taking off in the school system. And I know that's a very poor design of a slide, and my Vista person said, Tanis, you're not supposed to do it that way. I kind of wanted to give you the impact that it really is happening in many places around the country. Oakland School District is a leader, Chicago Public Schools, Minnesota, as Lori mentioned, at the Minnesota Department of Education, they have a staff person whose total responsibility is to go out into the schools and train in restorative strategies. Pennsylvania has a huge initiative, as does Maine. Colorado, you'll see an example of that in a minute. Texas and Wisconsin are on board, as well as Michigan and Tennessee. And in Florida, Miami has a huge initiative that's just starting up. And we know that we have some going on in Palm Beach schools and in Lee, Alachua, and Indian River. At a recent state DOE conference, Rex, what was that conference you presented at?
The engagement conference.
The state-level engagement and safe school conference, it received a lot of attention. As a matter of fact, we were invited to present our model at that conference by the representative from the Florida Department of Education. So people are looking toward Sarasota, and Rex went and did a fabulous job presenting our program. So right now we'd like to, before we explain our model, we'd like for you to see and hear in their own voices a program that's going on in Colorado. Oops.
Now curbing conflicts in high school. Hari Srinivasan looks at a new approach to discipline that replaces suspensions with conversations.
In Aurora, Colorado, Principal Matthew Willis welcomes the recent changes at Hinckley High School, where 75% of the 2,000-plus students qualify for free and reduced meals. Willis says student fights are down and respect among classmates is up.
Last year, we had a 48% reduction in out-of-school suspensions when it comes to physical altercations between students. In 2007-8, we had approximately 263 physical altercations. And so far for this year, we've only had 31 physical altercations.
So good morning. Thank you for being here.
The turnaround, he says, began when Hinckley High started using a form of discipline called restorative justice.
Every single year over the last 3 full years that we've been doing restorative justice, you see significant declines in defiance, disobedience, and use of profanity.
This is called a talking circle, so when we have problems in the school, we come together and talk about it.
Now, when a minor altercation does occur, students, parents, and the dean face each other in a restorative circle.
Restorative is that you bring back the kids, if it's student with student, or if it's student with staff, you restore the relationship. So if there's conflict or wrongdoing, we come together and we talk about it and we try to heal the harm that was caused from the incident. So thank you for everything you said so far, and now this is...
Dean of Students Bonnie Martinez facilitates.
We speak openly and honestly, but with respect.
On the day we visited, 2 sophomore girls caught up in a physical fight were brought to a circle with their parents instead of being suspended.
So this is our talking stick. So who's ever holding this is the one's talking and everyone else is listening. You say what happened from your point of view, and you say what happened from your point of view. And sometimes we don't always agree on all the facts or whatever.
She called me the B word, and then
and then we just started fighting.
That's kind of a liar of you. She say to be honest, and I think you have to be honest. I was here and she come walking to me and so she started again.
Students are asked to talk about the harm their actions may have caused, and Martinez requires everyone to sign an agreement.
What do you take responsibility for? What do you think we could do to heal the harm that was caused?
I'm sorry for having these problems that we've been having, and I don't want it to happen again.
Okay. You're not going to be enemies, but you're going to treat others with respect. That, to some people, may be viewed as a soft discipline, especially if you look at the Western culture. You know, we're about war and violence. We're not about peace and harmony. But however, for those girls to come together and for their families to come together and talk about it and to really, you know, to express truly what happened, how did it affect me and others, what am I responsible for and how do I solve it, that's deeper than just writing up paperwork and one person goes their way and the other person goes their way and nothing was ever communicated.
What do we know about anger? It's a secondary feeling. What is underneath anger? A lot of deeper emotions and feelings.
At Hinckley, the restorative justice circles go beyond the dean's office. Peer mentoring classes use role-playing to teach students how to conduct circles on their own.
How does it make you feel?
It pisses me off that he's spreading rumors about me, but I didn't do nothing big.
Sophomore Nice Smith thinks the circles bring better results than suspension.
It used to be like you just get sent home for 5 days, but that doesn't resolve nothing. You just sit there and you come back with the same anger.
When teachers don't resolve the harm by doing restorative justice, then that conflict is always there. And usually what will happen is kids will just stay angry. And I don't like that teacher, and so I don't care what you say, and they'll just disrupt.
Colorado's legislature eliminated zero tolerance in schools in 2012.
The ideas of traditional discipline don't exist anymore. When in the old days, when a student or a kid got into trouble, we would spank them. And we moved away from spanking because it no longer met the values of our society. The same is true with the traditional discipline where it's all about punishment. It's not about restoring relationships. It's not about taking responsibility for your actions. It's about punishment. And so that no longer fits the society of our future. What fits the society of our future is people coming together and working and solving problems together.
Gracias. Mucho gusto. Gracias.
And while Colorado is now ahead of the national movement, the state actually played a role in the making of zero tolerance policies after the 1999 shootings at Columbine High School.
Anytime you're in a school, you've got all these stakeholders.
Sarah Park is the Director of Education for the Denver Foundation, one of the sponsors of Hinckley's restorative justice program.
In Colorado, our zero tolerance law was really in response to Columbine. And we were scared. We were all heartbroken. We were terrified, and we wanted to make sure kids were safe. And so we thought, well, let's do this. Let's make clear that this is non-negotiable. And that's really where the intention around zero tolerance came from. Unfortunately, the way it played out was in more negative educational outcomes. You can't learn if you're not there. And they also, there's studies linking suspension to incarcerations, and it's much more likely that a kid is suspended and repeatedly suspended that they'll end up in jail. And it's much more likely that if they're suspended even once in 9th grade, they're more likely to drop out.
Aurora police officer Jake Bunch, who's assigned to Hinckley High School, says social media has accelerated his need to rely on personal connections that can come from restorative justice.
With like Facebook and Twitter, information just spreads so quickly now that, you know, it's hard to stay on top of it because the kids know about something that's going to go down way before we could ever know. If kids, you know, if I build that relationship with them and they know they can come talk to me before it becomes a violent issue, it ties right in with restorative justice.
What is the role of an individual in society?
Not all conflicts can be resolved through restorative circles. Even supporters see the process as one of many approaches. And skeptics question it. For his part, Principal Willis remains a strong believer in the approach and is sharing the school's method with districts across the state.
video actually summarizes quite a bit of what we're going to be discussing as to what we do at Sarasota County. Those values, those practices in place really help us to look at how we can develop relationships with our students in a different way, and those relationships is what's going to make a difference in how students behave.
Thank you. Wasn't sure what all that meant, but anyway, we're good. So anyway, how it really ties into PBS is really that the traditional approach of PBS was just to teach the kids and tell them what behavioral expectations we need them to do. We need you to walk in line, keep your hands and feet to yourself, use kind words. So we were telling them what they needed to do, and that was part of that teaching process. And then we'd reinforce kids who did the right thing, and those who didn't, we'd be looking at doing some counseling or some secondary interventions for them. But we selected restorative strategies when I was in Minnesota because all of a sudden now it dawned on me, rather than telling kids what we want them to do, we need to explain to them, have them be part of the process of why those behaviors are important to us. So I just said, this is the why of PBS, and for me it's been kind of a missing concept. So as we look at the eye brain, and the police officer in the video talked about that, the influence of social media. Our students are so proficient at communicating with social media that there's no need for them to be looking each other in the face and talking. Even all of us, if I took a hand poll right now and asked how many people had a device on them right now and that they were using it just before we started, probably everyone would have their hands up, including myself. We are dependent upon that instant gratification, that instant communication skill. But we lose something in that. It's really easy for kids to not have to be empathetic toward their kids because there's no responsibility for the words that they put into that media. We have cyberbullying that we deal with on a regular basis. And again, there's no need to have language skills because they can LOL all they want to without really having to talk about what that language skill is in terms of their communication ability. So I really like the idea of we have to combat the eye brain syndrome to get kids to be responsible for their communication to one another. Why restorative strategies? We talk about this with our staff. There's a lot of data out there. It's really disturbing to me. Came back from our conference in Fort Lauderdale last year, and I thought to myself, I don't live in a very nice society because we incarcerate people way more in our society than any place else in the world. And I never really had that perspective that we don't look at other alternatives, but we are now, as a nation, starting to look at different things. And one graphic here that's the best I could pull out of this gentleman's research paper really sums up to me the battle we have in front of us. And what you see in front of us is three demographics of white population, Hispanic, and the black population. And the categories are C, those who have participated in some level of college, high school or the high school graduates, and DO is dropout. So as you look at the statistics over on the far right, if you're an African-American person between 1972 and 2010, which spans 38 years, you had a 35% chance of being incarcerated if you dropped out of high school. So over 38 years, 35% of our African-Americans that dropped out of high school were incarcerated. That's staggering to me. I never had that kind of information presented to me in this way. And there's others. There's other researchers, and this is a national effort to kind of bring this to us, to look at other alternatives. So as we train our teachers, we say, why does it matter? Well, it matters right here. We don't want our kids to be dropping out because the consequences are not going to be healthy for them. And preventing them from dropping out is having them engaged from the first moment they enter our classrooms. So elementary, up to middle, and up to high. So we have a clear purpose of how we can make an impact. So how do we integrate restorative strategies? Well, we know that positive behavior support comes in 3 tiers. Tier 1 for the whole community, Tier 2 for targeted interventions for groups of kids, and Tier 3 for those intensive interventions for individuals. So as we look at restorative strategies, it's the same philosophy. We're looking to build relationships, build community, create safety and trust in a classroom or an environment. When we have issues that disrupt that community, we want to repair those relationships. We can pull those students who are having some issues on the playground or at recess or through social media, bring them together face to face so that they can resolve those issues. And then the third, the rebuilding relationships, are those instances where we'd have a discipline infraction where we would want to rebuild that relationship between the student who was the perpetrator and that student who was harmed, or the teacher who was harmed, or the school themselves who could be harmed by vandalism or property damage. And here side by side is real quick, and I think you already have this for your read before information, but I just wanted to put it in perspective for us. Restorative strategies fits really well into PBS, so we're not asking people to do something different. Matter of fact, the feedback we're getting from our teachers is now that PBS is becoming more real to them because they actually have an active part in it. They have an active part before, but now it's taking things. I always go into classroom management trainings, take your rules off the wall and make it real to your kids, make it meaningful. And this process has done that for our teachers and for our students. So there are several kind of circles that we're teaching as we go through this and advocating our staff to use. One is a community building circle. We're developing that safety and trust. We're practicing the ceremony of circle. It's very different than having morning circle where you have today's Monday or Tuesday, October 20th. Yesterday was Monday the 19th. Tomorrow is going to be Wednesday the 21st. It is a circle with a purpose and a ceremony. There's a beginning and there's an ending, and it's a sacred space that we create in each of our classrooms. And the fact that I would say sacred space in this forum makes me kind of think of why would I do that, but to me there's something magical about that space that we put in a proactive or community building circle. It's different than any other environment that we ask our students and our staff, for that reason, and for that matter, to engage in. And then we have proactive circles where we're discussing issues, we're discussing our expectations, and I'll give you some examples of that in a little bit. Our academic circles, we're taking the academic content and we're using the circle process so that everyone has a chance to participate. In the circle with the talking stick, as you saw in the video, everyone has an opportunity to participate. So rather than just waiting for the students, I call them the high achieving students or the impatient students who are constantly raising their hand when the teacher asks a question. We don't have to do that. Everyone has a chance to respond to that prompt with their own ideas. Responsive or targeted circles, we address either whole classroom problems when students maybe for the third day in a row get a naughty note from the specials area teacher. The teacher wants to address their behavior in specials, so the whole class would discuss that in the circle. Or if there's a small group of kids that need or aren't getting along together who need that forum to communicate directly with each other, similar to what you saw in the video. And then we have restorative meetings where we would take a school designee and the perpetrator and the person who experienced the harm, put them together, and if that process is done with integrity and sincerity, there might be an alternative to suspension. It's not fixed for every situation. We tell our staff it is another resource, another way of approaching different issues. It's not a cure-all for everything, although it is a fantastic process. So how do we use restorative strategies in context that establish a safe learning environment? We increase student engagement, address potential problems. We teach empathy. Every time we're in a circle, we are practicing empathy. We are having to listen to our peers. We extend our academic instruction, solve whole group and small group problem solving, and selected alternatives for different situations that might lend themselves to a different outcome besides suspension. All right, so I want to look at my notes because I'm sure I'm forgetting a few things as we go through. I'm going to go back because there's something that's really important to me I want to share with you. The academic circles are something that it's in the literature, but it's not really a main focus for restorative justice or strategies. But we immediately saw in our first training that it was going to be an invaluable way to engage kids in the academic world. So we're role modeling as we're developing our trainings for our staff. We're role modeling how that works. And we took a third grade reading lesson out of ELA for Reading Wonders on teamwork, and we introduced that. And it was so much fun for me to watch our staff, who are all elementary teachers, to engage in that process of using restorative circles and seeing the ahas we can do that. And the value of giving every person, every student, the opportunity to respond to the prompt. Things like, and they can assess the prior knowledge of their students. What is a team? What does teamwork mean to you? We go around the circle. So now we can assess their prior knowledge that the students are bringing into that circle. We can define what teamwork, we can ask them about that. Give them examples. We can integrate teamwork across academic areas. We can talk about what teamwork is, have a science or social studies project throughout that week, come back in the circle at the end of the week and talk again about what does teamwork mean to you and use specific examples. So I think we're
okay. So I'm going to wrap up with a summary of where we are now and a few quick vignettes. We have trained core teams at every elementary school. When we started the training, we asked for a principal or an administrator, the PBS coordinator, the guidance counselor, and the teacher to come in and be trained, which we did. We're now training all other elementary school staff members who are willing to come to the training. We're trying to saturate this strategy at the elementary schools. We're getting ready to develop a plan for training at the middle schools. As you know, we have a brand new executive director of middle school, so we want to give her a few days, at least 2 weeks, to get her feet under her in that position and then talk to her about planning for middle schools. We're working with district staff and with the VISTAs to start looking at our behavior and consequence chart to identify those behaviors that could result in out-of-school suspension that people might be willing to try to use alternatives to out-of-school suspension. And we're planning for training for that Tier 3 restorative meeting that's so critical and so different way of work that also includes community agencies and families. So we're going to be extending the training to select community agencies, DJJ, Sheriff's Department, caseworkers, the courts, you name it, and with parents. Finally, I'd like to mention one thing and then 3 quick vignettes. The thing that concerns me about this model is it looks too easy, and we get really fast results. The superintendent shared with you the excitement of the teacher. Was that last night or now? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. We made a big presentation last night. It's all running together. But if I can, a teacher ran up to her and said, "This is great. I'm really excited. I hope this will last." So it looks too easy, and it really takes careful training to set the stage, to establish the safety, to help kids feel safe, to learn how to talk to one another, to manage that touchy situation. Are we going too far? Are kids feeling okay? So that's why, because a lot of people might say, well, I can put people in a circle and talk. It's very different than that. It's much more technical. 3 quick vignettes. 3rd grade teacher at a school using restorative strategies. 4 little girls in her classroom started to fight with one another, and they came running over to her to solve the problem. And she said, well, what do you think you could do? And they said, we think we need to circle up. And so it's become a verb to our kids. So they all got together. They ran the circle. Of course, the teacher was listening to make sure she was there if they needed her. But the girls resolved their problems in that setting. Another classroom, the teacher ran a circle, and kids were sharing about things that were problems for them. And one little boy shared that he felt like he was bullied all the time, and he shared how that made him feel. And after the circle, the kids came up to him and said, we're really sorry. We didn't understand that you felt that way. He went home and told his mother. His mother put it on Facebook. Oh, my gosh, our school has this new great program. My kid's been bullied for so long, and now we have a solution. And finally, I'd just like to share with you, if you indulge my reading, because it's a quote from Thomas D'inverno, the principal at Tuttle Elementary School, who's been very involved with this project. And this is what he submitted. Tuttle Elementary School has a strong track record in implementing positive behavior support, PBS. We have a dedicated PBS team that learns together and helps others learn about school-wide PBS model. The Tuttle PBS team first attended the district training about restorative strategies in the summer of 2014. That's when we trained those core teams from the elementary schools. And the team recommended the school-wide implementation of restorative circles. We built this time into the weekly schedule so that all students K through 5 could benefit from the restorative circle time. So this principle requires, help me Rex, at least once a week, every teacher to run a restorative circle. Last year, he continues, 2014-15, we focused on building the circle community within the classroom by ensuring common expectations as well as teacher creativity. Students have benefited from the circle time by having an opportunity to share their perspective, listen to other students, as well as develop respect for one another. In the current year of implementing restorative circles, we have seen a decline in the amount of behavior referrals starting off the year in comparison to the previous school year. We currently are learning about the use of the Tier 2 responsive circles, and these have been used by our guidance counselor and administration to help students in smaller groups. So thank you. We wanted to catch you up on what we've been doing, especially because, as I mentioned, we will be moving to bringing community members in for the training and getting them to know about the program, and we certainly wanted you to be filled in on this first. So thank you for your time.
Jay?
I have some questions. I don't know where to turn around or... Yeah, come over here. This would be helpful.
The clicker was not going from there. So
that's right. Great ideas. I just had a few questions. You know, anything we can do on behavior side is so important because, as you said, everybody today on social media doesn't take responsibility. If any of you saw what happened after Michigan State, and the amount of death threats and so forth, the punter on the Michigan team got just unacceptable. And that may be extreme, but I've heard, kids who do get bullied and have problems. My question is, how do our VISTA volunteers interface with this program? That's one of my questions.
Well, they just started with us, but they're already off to the races. They are doing the research for us in terms of where effective programs are happening and the elements of those programs. How is it implemented in schools? Is there any funding required? Who are the main players? We're also asking them to find programs that are in place for a period, that have been in place for a period of time, where they have an evaluation component, because we need to start collecting data on this, and we don't feel like we want to reinvent the wheel if there's something out there. They're helping to gather resources for our teachers and our administrators who are using this. We plan to have one of those shared folders where everyone who uses restorative strategies can go and grab lesson plans, sentence starters, videos, that kind of thing. They are going to go out into the schools with us and help teachers and others facilitate circles and much, much more.
Well, I know that these are important, but we get right down to it. Kids don't deal with feelings very well. Right. And that's the undertone before we get to any of these other levels. Right. That's why I like Social Black Belt so much, because I think that identifies some areas that we might want to look at as well.
Well,
if you're
that's
familiar
why
with Social Black Belt.
Yeah, that's why it's so crucial that we have this building of the safe environment and the proactive circles, because we do have them practice, sharing feelings in a safe environment and learning how to handle that. So that's a huge part of this program.
But I do hope you'll share with us and keep us in the loop. Sometimes we hear about these wonderful programs and then we don't get any more information. I, for one, would like to have some ideas, some data, and how well the program's working, because anything we can do to help kids in this arena is something that's, not reading, writing, and arithmetic, but certainly impacts everything we do in the school district. So I think it's exciting. I think it brings our community. Thank you to the community for helping us with this. I think this is wonderful. Thank you to our VISTA volunteers. Yay-hoo for you, and I'm glad you went to Ringling and you're local and you understand it.
New College.
I'm sorry, I said Ringling.
Okay.
We
have so many wonderful.
We do.
That's,
we really
we
do. But thank you to our students from New College, yes, for helping us with this project, and just keep us in the loop, please.
Absolutely.
Bring back some good stuff.
Okay, we will. Thanks.
Is this something that we had in place a few years ago, very similar to this? Because I remember being at Ashton Elementary and having the kids, when they had a conflict with each other, sitting down and discussing the conflict. And what happened to that? And I don't want to see the same thing happen to this.
I think what you're referring to is conflict mediation, and that has been in several schools through their counseling department. So they would train peer mentors to go through, or mediators, and they would handle conflicts, or we would train students themselves to resolve their own problems. It was targeted for those few students who had issues, and many times it wasn't a school-based, classroom-based initiative. They were sent out to have that mediation in a separate place. So this is a little different in that it's school-wide, it's classroom-oriented as the foundation. and that similar in terms of mediation or conflict resolution are Tier 2 and Tier 3. But there's a Tier 1 component to this that's different than we've ever had before. And students have more ownership in it than they've had in the past. In the past, it was a teaching model. This is an engagement model. I see that as the big difference.
I see them in the classroom talking to each other and doing the mediation right in the classroom. So it was classroom-based, because I remember being there. And my only comment is that I don't want to lose this because it sounds like a really great program. So whatever we can do to help you maintain it, just let us know, because we need to deal with these issues, and they can't be in isolation from education. It's all part of it.
Yeah, one big change that I see is that our teachers see this as part of their role. A lot of times in the past when we've had conflict resolution, and I was, as a past school counselor myself, I would be the one doing classroom guidance. I would be teaching and coaching those kids on how to resolve mediation or their issues through mediation. Now the teachers are taking that active role, and it's not just for problem solving. It is for creating that community to have kids communicate with each other in a positive manner, as well as now being able to address those issues. So I do see this as a different way of approaching it, and I honestly, from the response I've gotten from the teachers who have taken the training, their commitment and to continue this philosophy is incredible, because they see the impact on their students.
Because we need to be able to change behavior. And if we don't change behavior in the early grades, we're certainly not, we're going to have a more difficult time changing it in the high school.
Agreed.
So,
and Mrs. Zucker, one thing that you all can do is, if the fact that you know about this, if you support this, then talk in the community about this. So when we're approaching the court system, when we're approaching DJJ, DCF, families, mentor organizations, that they understand that this, I hope too, and the way we built this is a way of work that's here to stay, and it's just not another new program that's passing through.
Well, I can tell you from DJJ, restorative justice is one of their issues. So maybe what we need to do is to have you all present at one of the DJJ meetings, one of our state meetings.
That would be great. Our SHORE group, as well as they support us, they keep us honest, and they invite us on a regular basis to their convocations, Nehemiah gatherings, and us meeting the superintendent, and the superintendent invites me to come along to report back to them on our progress. And last night when we did our report, Bernadette DePino was there reporting on the civil citation project, and we leaned across and said, we need to talk, and she said, absolutely, and she was very familiar with this program, too.
Right.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you.
The other place is at the Florida School Board Association. Perhaps you could come and do a unit there.
Sure. Whatever you need us to do.
Okay.
Shirley?
Well, first I'd like to thank our SURE volunteers for the work that they do in our community. Yes, they're faith-based and from our churches, but that isn't what they're spreading. They're trying to solve our community's problems, and I really thank you for that, and any help we can get for raising happy, healthy, educated students, we truly appreciate. Thank you for your work. I became concerned about out-of-school suspensions before I was on the school board. I had an employee of mine who was our receptionist that seemed to be having to take off work quite a bit. And one day, and she was called on the carpet for it. You're a new employee. You keep taking off time. And she was in tears. And I talked to her, and the reason she was in tears, and she got a call. It was not our school district. It was a neighboring school district. But he was rather threatening, saying, you need to come in here, and if you don't come in here, we're reporting you to Department of Children and Families for neglect because you're not taking care of. He was a third-grade boy that was new in school, and I can tell you from my experience, we moved a lot. My brother was the new boy in school, and I don't know why, but somehow they tend to get beat up a lot or get into issues. And I saw how that was affecting her position in our company. I mean, on the one hand, I could feel for her, but on the other hand, here we've got supposedly an employee that's a receptionist that was missing so many days, and it didn't seem to be an end to it. And so I was seeing out-of-school suspensions, even for a day, was causing problems. And I said, there's got to be a better way. And besides, that kid was being picked on. He was being bullied. So why aren't we fixing the problem rather than, and it wasn't our school district, but it happens in all school districts. So I'm glad to see this, because I think we're teaching children skills that they need. These are some of the things that I learned when I took a psychology course in high school. And I'm like, geez, why didn't I learn this back on? It would have helped me a lot. And I know we're teaching it as young as kindergarten. They're learning these positive behavior support systems. But one thing I'm also concerned about is when we have a child that comes to school after having a traumatic night, the parents were in a knockdown, drag-out, and police were there, and someone was arrested, and that kid comes to school and is not feeling good, is feeling upset, and he acts out, or maybe a neighbor kid who's in his class knows about it and picks on him about it, and it's something from home that's causing it. And I know sending the kid home again only compounded the problem, so that bothered me. But I would like to be able to see, and I want our schools to be a safe place for these kids. And I know it is. And I've known that some kids act out when it comes time to get their backpack on and go home again. I've seen that happen. Is there a way that we are connecting with community resources to help the home life for some of these kids that are acting out because of it, not because of anything that's really happening in school, but because of what they're bringing to school?
Well, the issues that emerge in this model, certainly this model is designed to bring in other agencies. So definitely, I mean, we already have systems in place with guidance counselors and connections with social agencies. So in terms of this model, it's key that we bring in community folks and families in some of these interactions. Matter of fact, I'm thinking why Lori first, you might say, well, why is the volunteer coordinator doing this? Well, I think when Lori first envisioned how this model would work, she knew it would involve a lot of community folks, so thought that if I could get involved, I could help with that. And then the fact that my teaching career has been working with children with severe emotional disabilities, that just added to it. So absolutely, community is a key factor to this, yes. And if I could, I just would like to mention one more thing that sometimes comes up as a concern. People saying, I don't have enough time. The issue is this is not another thing to do. This is a way to do the current work. It's not added on. It doesn't take additional time. If there's a certain academic strategy or issue, you address it in this approach rather than in chairs. If you're teaching less social skills or you're trying to establish classroom rules, instead of having kids sit in the classroom and raise their hands, you do it in this context with some very specific, well-designed strategies to monitor and manage and make the most of the interaction. So time, it's not additional time. It's the way to do current work.
Well, I think it'd be more positive time, too, because so much of sometimes a teacher's time is spent trying to correct misbehavior. And if they can model good behavior, I think it's a better use of their time. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you, students, also.
I love this. I'm very excited about it. One thing that Lori said at the beginning was it's setting a culture, and I think that shifts everything. I mean, you hear from everyone that we're seeing more and more behavioral issues, and whatever that causes, it does play a role in the academia of our students. And so I'm very excited about this. I've been looking into other districts that have been doing it, and I was aware of Miami-Dade, so I'd like to actually go see kind of what they're doing. But, a couple questions that I have, and you kind of answered it. One challenge is because I know time is so limited and how many things are coming down the pipe for teachers, I'm happy to hear that they are embracing it in the aspect that it's not another thing that's piling on, that it's actually going to help them create a better environment in the classroom and, in essence, the students' academia. But so going back, we have, we're trying to get more and more teachers. So you have, different, we have core teams at each elementary, right? And then, and now we're trying to invite other staff members in. How is that going, and what can we do to help that?
It's going really well, and we're slowly building. We have 3 tiers, and then we have elementary, middle, and high. So elementary school, we started with Tier 1 strategies. Now we're starting to teach them Tier 2 strategies while we're planning to start Tier 1 strategies at middle. You see how we're going to be building, and then at the same time bringing the community in. So it's going well. I think, to answer your question, letting teachers know that you believe in this program and you believe in this model and you support it and it's here to stay. The power we had in the beginning to convince teachers that this was just not the flavor of the year was that a fact that this initiative comes out of the superintendent's office. And I made that very clear. Well, to them, that they could feel comfortable if they're going to put the effort in to have this training, go through this training, that's where it's coming from. Well, Lori is going to retire. So when she retires, can you all make it continue? That's what I would say. Don't let it leave with her, because she's the driving force behind this.
Well, and then to kind of follow up with what Jane had said, is the data aspect, because I'm sure it's going to defend the benefits of this program, but those always help when we're trying to continue a program like this. And I think I have, just looking at other programs similar to this in other districts, it has made a huge impact. Mm-hmm. And so I know we all verbally say we support it, but that would really help us to continue to support
Absolutely.
it, because I think it's very, very necessary. But thank you for your work. Thank you, everyone. I love the community involvement, because it all impacts us all. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Then the board had requested that we allow some time for our continued discussion regarding impact fees prior to the vote that will occur at our board meeting. So we don't have a presentation lined up. Certainly there are individuals here if there are any other questions, but it's really your time.
So who's our resident expert on the actual ordinance?
In terms of the actual, what the ordinance says?
Yeah, I think.
Between Scott and Kathy, why don't you come on up, guys?
Yeah.
So you'll be real close.
I actually kind of like the fact that you didn't have us come up right.
Well, I wanted to see where we went, but it didn't take long, did it?
Nope.
I kind of had some questions on both the difference in values on and I'm talking about between single-family homes and multifamily and stuff. I wanted some explanation on that, but also why we have chosen, or the county's chosen, to exempt affordable housing. I would think that parents with kids would probably be, if we had affordable housing out there, if we could ever figure out what that was, I would think they would be the ones that would be buying those affordable houses. So I'm not quite sure why we have an exemption on that as well. And I know there's another exemption in the enterprise zones that are around the county. I'm not quite sure, understanding why we have that. So I have issues with that. I also have issues with the difference in single-family home impact fee, construction tax, whatever we want to call it. Why we have one fee on single-family homes, a drastic reduction in multifamily homes. I mean, people with kids live in multifamily properties, and kind of had a concern about the senior housing. I do understand there was a lawsuit involved in this, and the courts ruled that we couldn't collect this tax on 55-plus neighborhoods that are designed just for that. So I just we seem to be throwing this huge net out here, but I'm just trying to figure out what the rationale is on a lot of those different reductions and exemptions.
Just to speak on one item that you said about the affordable housing, because I've been here longer than both of them, so can recall some things. And that discussion, that was a huge issue with the board for when they initiated the first impact fee. And it was as important as it was a deal breaker. If we could not figure out a way to accommodate families looking at price range that would be defined as affordable housing, that had to be part of this impact fee structure. So they, from what I understand, and again, I wasn't superintendent at that time, but from what I understood, that was a first in really associating at that back then, associating that kind of caveat as part of what they were recommending. But it was a huge issue at the time and something that was very important to that board that finally passed it, that be included as part of the ordinance. And so then I'll let them answer many of the others.
And we'll just kind of dog and pony this, I guess. You asked why is the rate different, single family versus multifamily versus mobile homes, and I think it simply boils down to the student generation rates that's associated with each one of those kinds of dwelling units. The average number of kids that you see coming out of a single family home is different than what you see coming out of an individual unit in a multifamily complex is different than what you see coming out of a mobile home. So it ties back to
I can understand that more in the mobile home section, but I look at, I don't want to name names, I've lived here my whole life. I know the big apartment complexes around town, and I know the school buses that stop in the front of these large apartment complexes and the number of students that get off the bus at these large apartment complexes. I had the discussion, way back when we first took this up, back in the early 2005, when did we, 4, whatever. There's a lot of discussion about growth. I see somebody in the room here that actually deals with growth on a regular basis, and affordable housing. I've always felt the school board's responsibility is not to control growth, limit growth, increase growth. I mean, that's not what we're here for. Same thing with affordable housing. Certainly we all care about affordable housing, but I don't understand, again, why we exempt affordable housing when, if what we're trying to do here is tax the people that are moving in from out of Sarasota with kids, I think we're missing a whole bunch of them by doing that. So if you've heard me speak over the last year, these aren't new things that I've come up with. It's just a lot of the concerns that I have with this tax that we're trying to reinstate.
We have no position on the affordable housing. That's a policy decision for the board. If you select and ask us, when we are working with the county, if you so desire an impact fee, and we go forward with the county to develop the ordinance, because it's ultimately their ordinance, that part of it can be stricken and would be stricken. That's a board decision to make, and a board policy decision, not a planning decision. In terms of the impact fee calculations, though, at the single-family, multifamily, and mobile home level, the calculations done by Tyndall Oliver that are in the study indicate that a single-family, and these are the planning numbers, is a 0.22. The multifamily is 0.063, and mobile home is 0.021. So mobile home and multifamily are significantly less than a single family, and that's why the rates are different. They all start, all of the calculations start at the same number, being they all start at what does the cost per student cost us, and then the ultimate determination of what the maximum allowable amount for an impact fee is determined based on calculating it against the student generation rate. So it's not something that we are making arbitrarily a decision on. It's a calculation that's been done by Tyndall Oliver in very specific terms.
And I'll go to you, Shirley. I just want to follow up on that because, again, I know Sarasota probably as well as anybody in this room, and I know there are neighborhoods that attract kids. I know there's neighborhoods, single-family home neighborhoods, that don't attract kids. I know there's apartment complexes that attract kids. I know there's apartment complexes that don't attract kids. So I just have this internal issue with throwing this huge net across the county when, if what we're trying to do here is tax people that are moving here, expanding our school district, for which we need to build more schools, I just have an issue with throwing this huge net across the county when we know that, again, there are neighborhoods that attract, and unfortunately most of the neighborhoods that attract kids are neighborhoods that have been here for 30, 40, 50 years. I'm thinking like Southgate and Gulfgate and some of these other neighborhoods. You go to where the schools are, and that's where all the kids live. So I'm just having this issue with throwing this huge net across the county to try to, if what we're trying to do is get the people that are moving here to bring kids here, how do we get more taxes out of them to build these new schools that we have to build because they moved here? Then we talk about this rational thing, but some of this just isn't real rational to me.
The Tyndall Albers team will be here this afternoon for the board meeting. So if you have specific questions about how the methodology was derived, they will be here this afternoon. But when remember, there's also two different numbers for single family. There's the 0.22, which is our planning number, and 0.17, which is actually what the impact fee calculation is based on. And when the reason that there's two different numbers is that they found when you do a county-wide number that includes all single-family residential homes, the number is actually less than than what you look at when you look at new developments. That's why the new development number is at 0.22, because I think contrary to what, and honestly that number surprised me, but contrary to what you might think, it is actually the new developments that are producing a higher number of student generation than an overall county-wide number. That's why there's a difference. The 0.22 is for us to use in the planning world as we are determining when and where to bring those new schools online. It's not part of the impact fee calculation. The impact fee calculation is done at the lower number, the 0.17 number. But again, your consultants will be here this afternoon at 3 o'clock if you have specific questions about the methodology used.
I have a question regarding the affordable housing, and how much, or do you know, or is that something they would know? How much affordable housing do we have coming online, or how much did we have? I don't know that we have that much affordable housing going on in Sarasota County.
We haven't, according to Mickey Ryan, your senior planner. We've recently had our first application for affordable housing in quite some time, so that I'm aware of, and that doesn't mean that they may not have yet come to us, but that we're aware of. We have only one in the system.
I wasn't part of that original vote that decided to do the exemption for affordable housing, and I'd be willing to address it again. But I think one thing that might have a play on that is that it's the same dollar amount regardless of what price the home is. So I would see that a home that's going for $300,000 or $900,000 or more than $1 million, which some of them are going for, that $3,000 wouldn't have as much impact as a home that's being sold for, and what is $150,000 affordable today?
It's lower than that.
Yeah, I mean, so that $3,000 would have a much higher impact on an affordable home than the average home that seems to be going up today. I wasn't here, so I don't know, but I would think that would be a rationale that I would just at this time think about.
Remember, though, that the calculation of the impact fee was not about the value of the home. It was about the likely generation of kids from that home. And that's kind of where you're going, Frank, is where are most of these kids coming from? You're not seeing a lot of kids from the $1 million home, but the impact fee was set based on the type of home it is, and on average, how many kids does that type of home generate?
So, I don't know if the chair would like to have a discussion on that, to go into that further.
Remember,
or if we're
that
just talking about it up or down.
That's a small part of my
issues
here. So, Jane?
It's always a consideration for me of how many students we have going to Charlotte County schools. As you all know, as the academics become more differentiated between the two counties, as they are becoming, I have calls from parents who are concerned about why they have to send their kids in middle and high school to Charlotte County. Do you know how many children we currently have that are going to Charlotte County schools?
Ballpark 200.
200.
Yes, and that would be L.A. Ainger and Lemon Bay High School.
Right.
And that's just a ballpark. We can do some quick research and get you a more accurate number, but it's in the 200 range.
Because if all those, if some portion of those decided to come back to school, that also impacts our numbers in our schools as well.
That's a study that we are initiating as a separate planning effort for the upcoming school year is to evaluate the 1999 agreement and work with the community to determine whether or not that agreement is still something that we should continue. So
Good.
we do have that's a separate
Yeah.
issue in some ways because
But it impacts our numbers.
It definitely impacts our numbers, and if we were to have to bring those students back into Sarasota County, then we would have to, reevaluate the impact that they would have on probably the Venice area schools because that's where they would probably be designated. But
And some of that area that we're talking about, they're living in, is some of the areas that are open for development as well.
that's true. A good portion of the areas that, so anything south of Minnesota Beach Road is designated right now to go to L.A. Anger or to Lemon Bay High School. When you think about that area, a good portion of it, probably two-thirds of that is in the West Villages project area.
Right.
But that section of West Villages, we've recently met with their development team. That area is not slated for development until 20 years from now, 10, 20 years from now. So a significant piece of the development area that is slated for the Lemon Bay or L.A. Anger schools is not going to come online immediately. So it would give us time to evaluate and determine how to address that if we decided not to continue the 1990 interlocal agreement with Sarasota or with Charlotte County Schools.
And one other question. I understand we have a motion on our board meeting this afternoon relative to a particular motion for the 50% or $3,917 per dwelling, et cetera.
Yes.
How do we arrive at that?
The motion is from me. And at the end of the day, I had to do what I felt was right, and it was a starting place, knowing that each one of you could change that motion or vote it up or down, but it was what I am recommending.
Yeah, I just wanted that stated because I think it would be good for everyone to know how that happened.
Well, first I want to say to you guys, thank you, because I know you've worked very hard and very long, and I know one thing that Kathy, you had mentioned is regardless of how we decide to move forward, there's a lot of work to be done, which kind of brings me to, I share a lot of Frank's concerns for a multitude of reasons, but when I think about all the conversations we've had, and you guys have provided a lot of great, conversations and feedback, but there seem to be a lot of additional potential options to review and to evaluate, which concerns me before we make this jump into it. I think evaluating, the residential impact that we have, I have concerns with, that's what Frank said as far as the likely generation of students being brought in by these homes, making sure the trend in which the data is showing will in fact happen. So I will let you know I'm very much, I am more inclined to hold off and see us watch the trend and see if it impacts and continue the conversation, look at our additional options. I think there are a number of options from an economic standpoint. I think what Frank said is very much right on as far as our job is really not here to control growth. But if we're talking about that from an economic standpoint, this area was hit incredibly hard. We're finally seeing growth happen. I don't think we're where we were 10 years ago, but I think we're definitely seeing it. But we still don't, there's a lot of unknowns, and that makes me very concerned to impose this. So I wanted to, after going through a lot of these conversations, let the board know, because I think there's a number of things that we can consider going forward. But I did want you guys to know that I appreciate a lot of your work, and that I know the work is not done regardless, and we're going to really lean on you for additional work, but I wanted to let you know it's appreciated. So,
Caroline?
What can we consider? I mean, what can we be consider? What are you talking about, Bridget? To help me understand, what is it that we should be looking for that we don't?
Well,
have
actually,
right
one
now?
thing you brought up was as far as for example, just looking at the Venice Middle and considering trying a K-8. I mean, I just look at other options, and I am in general, not a fan of imposing additional tax. I really want to put our brains together and see what we can offer as additional options. I also want to see trending growth as an option. I have an issue with the position of potentially like Frank said, there's a lot of, I don't particularly support the construction tax at the end of the day. I have issues with it, but I think that there may be things that we just need to review and look at additional options and make sure that the numbers are in fact going to be where they are.
What additional options? Not you. What additional options can we look at?
Well, we have evaluated, and it's been asked for in the past for us to evaluate Venice Middle as a K-8. That was an option that I think was brought up in June, early in the discussion, and we looked at looked at the potential of making Venice Middle a K-8. And to be honest, at one time it was something we thought might be a feasible option. But the more we've evaluated the growth that is expected in the Venice Middle District currently, and when you think of the Venice Middle District, it is to accept it includes all of River Road, all of 776, all of 41. So some very major development areas. It also includes a good portion of the Border Road, Laurel Road development areas. So when you think of the areas that are slated are districted right now to Venice Middle's student enrollment is approaching 600 today. Its capacity, yeah, very good news. It's up. It's higher than we've expected it to be. And was projected. It's the one middle school in the district, actually, that this year is higher enrollment than we projected it. So when you think of Venice Middle and where its district is, we believe the capacity that is on that campus, and yes, there is excess capacity on that campus today, but we believe that capacity is going to be absorbed by that community not too short time frame. In fact, the development proposal, if you remember the maps that we presented early on, within 10 years, Venice Middle goes red, and that would mean that it's going to go from green where it is today to red, which exceeds its existing capacity because it has most of the kind of central county development area that is available for development in the Venice area is all slated to go to Venice Middle. So that would be one area that we would say we looked at that. We evaluated it as a potential K-8 for long term, and we've determined that it's not the best use of that campus. The campus needs to maintain as a middle school because of the location and its growth areas. In terms of other options, as you know, there are 5 options to pay for growth. The one option you don't have is we have to be able to absorb the capacity. We are the only infrastructure that cannot change its level of service in order to address growth. We have to add additional capacity, and that's because there's a state constitutional amendment that stipulates class size. So at some point, we have to add capacity. But there are 5 options, and we've gone through 10 different scenarios that show you how you could use those. Now, you are welcome. We've given you 10, but you're welcome to go off the board and use something else. But your 5 options are you can defer maintenance. You can defer long-term projects, for example, the Goscio classroom wing. You can depend and utilize as much of the increase in ad valorem taxes as you can, although you can't depend on that completely. That was the one scenario that we presented to you that does not work. You can use borrowing, and you can impose an impact fee. Those are your 5 ways that you have at your disposal, and you can use a multiple of those 5 ways to help pay for the growth. The one thing you have to do is eventually pay for the growth.
I think from a broader perspective, the challenge you find yourself in today, excuse me, particularly at the elementary level and the high school level, is you have a capacity issue. Our elementary schools, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, are close to or over their capacities. The same is true for our high schools. They are all nearing their capacity. If growth is to occur, the question becomes, where do you put those kids? Because right now, with the exception of at the middle level, you don't have capacity. So we're going to have to do something to house those students.
And at the middle level,
pay for it.
And at the middle level, which is the one area that in the 10-year projection we maintain capacity. At the elementary level and at the high school level, and within the next 10 years, we have to add capacity because we can't redistrict our way out of the problem. The middle school level, and you also asked us to evaluate this because we told you early on that at the middle level there is additional capacity in district-wide to absorb that development. The problem is where the location of that capacity exists. It exists at Booker Middle, and it exists at Woodland Middle. The only way to take care of the middle school problem would then be to redistrict the entire county. And Mickey and I did kind of a slosh of what that would mean. And just because of the way the districts work, we would be redistricting it. And, you know, when you think of the work we've been doing at at Venice Middle, kind of the whole idea of Venice Middle is your school, if we redistricted Venice Middle, we would move it into Northport. That takes away your stated policy that you want your schools to be community-based schools. So we would not recommend going that route. Now, at the middle school route, you could do that. You could save the money of a middle school and redistrict countywide. It just would mean some very significant decisions on your part when it comes to redistricting.
The thing that bothers me is that I know our incoming kindergarten classes are down. And I know that our sixth grade classes are down as well, so that we do have capacity in both those areas. And both those areas is what we're talking about, the need for extra schools.
To the extent that they're down marginally, and one data point does not make a trend. You know, I guess what part of the baseline of the Tyndall Oliver study was they kind of took a 30-year snapshot of what does Sarasota look like. And we have, over time, grown. And so now that you're at capacity, how do you accommodate that growth? So I think that you saw, and you're right, in fact, Al and I were just talking about the projections this morning. Kindergarten is down very marginally, but I think to think that that's going to be the trend over time is just not the case.
And just to correct, the sixth grade was down from our projection of an increase. Sixth grade still increased. In overall enrollment from last year, we had just projected a larger increase.
So even in the kindergarten, the projections are based on projections, not on actual. That makes sense?
Beyond the current year, it certainly is.
Right. So when I say it's down, it is down, but it's down from projected, where it was supposed to be.
Right.
And remember that that's one of the flexibilities that you have with impact fees. We will only collect an impact fee if we issue a building permit. There is no collection of impact. This certificate. Thank you. I'm sorry. Certificate of occupancy. So we do not. We will not collect if the projections as Tyndall Oliver has determined them to be, if they are off, we won't collect at the same rate, or we could collect higher rate if it happens faster. We could collect lower at a lower rate. So there's some flexibility to the impact fee, which means that the most important nexus when you talk legally for impact fees is, one, you demonstrate that there's demand, and we've demonstrated that today at the elementary level and at the high school level we have demand, and at the middle school level we have locational demand. The other nexus that we need to show is that we have development, and that the money would be spent in the school areas that we have that development happening. When you look at where Tyndall Oliver in the growth management side of this study has projected this new schools, they are all in new growth areas. There are no new schools being projected to be or being suggested to be in the established development area. They are close to or east of I-75 in the development corridor or in Northport. So
before you leave that thought, though, even though you're not going to need a school for that area, if somebody builds a house on an undeveloped parcel in these areas that are what we would call infill,
right,
they pay this tax.
That's
correct?
True. That is true. But that's where the redistricting, again, remember we have to do redistricting. So even the schools that we have, at the elementary level, it's not just the new growth areas that are feeling the pinch, it's countywide. So if you have a significant infill area in an established development area, we would have to redistrict, then we may have to be able to redistrict it, because we could cause an infill school to go to overcapacity. So yes, you would impose an impact fee on any new development wherever that location is, but in terms of the school location, either through redistricting or through construction, we would only be building or creating new capacity to meet the new demand.
Shirley?
Speaking of some schools that we have right now, across the street, Philippi Shores has many more kindergartners than they expected. I don't know if it's 3 or 4 that they've had to have double classes because they have no classrooms for them. They've got 2 teachers, and my daughter is one of those classes, and she says it's working out just fine, having 32 kids and 26 kids in a classroom. So we are having growth in kindergartens in some areas. And I drive in my area up and down Proctor and across Honoré and McIntosh, and I see new development going in that's going to be impacting Ashton, that's going to be impacting Philippi Shores, and those schools are already at or over capacity. So it isn't just the new schools that have to be built that's being impacted by growth. We talked about, it was mentioned that, we shouldn't be doing things that either prohibit or help growth. But, part of what we did when we did the moratorium was to help restore growth. So you can't say you have a moratorium to help things get back on track and then say, oh, well, we're not going to do the impact fee because we shouldn't be affecting growth. That's not our position. Well, that's not where we were a few years ago. I was concerned, and I was quoted again in the paper being surprised, I forget exactly what the word was, at the $7,835 impact fee that came up. Because just a few years ago we were being told there wasn't growth or we didn't need growth. And so I was surprised that the growth was that high. In fact, I'm kind of thinking we made a mistake when we extended the moratorium the last time. Maybe we should have done this study back then. Maybe they would have come back and said, instead of saying 7,800, maybe they would have said it was only 6,000. But I was kind of under the impression that even the 2,000 might have been too high. So I don't know how I got that misinformation, but I did. And then I also said, well, how can our high schools be at capacity? We just rebuilt. In fact, we're not even finished rebuilding one of our high schools. And then I'm reminded that under Florida law, we can't build for what expected capacity. We can only build for current capacity. It would have been nice to have built that extra space at those schools while we were there building. But we did build the core capacity, the lunchrooms and the libraries and some of those others in the administration, to be able to accept another wing. But it's surprising to hear when we just finished rebuilding them that we need more high schools. And I'm like, but things are a lot different than they were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we were one mill would bring in $60 million, and we had 2.0 for capital. So we were bringing in $160 million a year for capital to help pay for the growth that was with the exploding growth. So this $120 million helped us pay for that growth. In addition, we had the $2,000 or $2,039 impact fee that helped pay for it. We had the lower interest rates, but we also had growth in charter schools that we hadn't seen before that helped us accept some of that growth to help us shore that impact. I don't think we're going to have that anymore because now we don't have that $120 million in revenue for the capital, and I don't think we will. I mean, because the legislature dropped it from 2.0 mil to 1.5 mils, and you weren't here for all of that, but I know you're going to try to catch up for it as soon as you can. So the amount of revenue between the lowered property values that we're seeing now from what they were 10, 15 years ago, in addition to the lowered millage rate that we can get from the state, really basically chops in half the dollars that we can get from those capital that we can use for growth and still pay for the maintenance and everything else. And thank God you've kept that up, and our schools, I think, are the best shape of any school district in the state of Florida. But that growth in charter schools was something that also helped cushion us And I think we've seen a slowing of that in Sarasota County. There was one school that applied for and then didn't follow through. Last year there was only one, and that was, bordered on the county, Charlotte County, Sarasota County. We're not seeing that growth in charter schools. I'm concerned that the growth we're going to see in the next 10 years is going to impact us much stronger than it did in the last growth spurt we had. And you talk about we can make a change in the rate of the impact fees if things change. When you said we, you didn't mean we, you and Scott over there. You meant we, the people around this table, because it would take a vote of the school board, correct, to change that. So if I'm right, and some other people might be right, we might have to come back and increase that rate of what we're proposing here, because that 50% might be too modest a rate to put forward when you look at all these other things. And if I'm wrong, and if Tyndall Oliver is wrong, we can come back and lower that rate. We can do that, and I'm thinking I can't imagine anybody not wanting to do that. But to say that, as some people have come here to say, and we got a letter from a young lady saying it too, that the growth isn't going to be there. I'm like, drive down 681, drive down Honorary, drive down, Venice. The growth is there. And you don't even have to drive. You can sit in your own home and read the business section of the paper today. A well-known local builder, again, record number of permits. And that's been the news every day, every month for the last year or more. And the Wall Street Journal again today, the home builders in the U.S., the highest level of success or expectation than they've had over the 10-year cycle. So we're looking at it nationally, we're looking at it on the statewide, and we can see it here locally. You don't have to drive around, just pick up your newspaper and you can see that it's happening. And it's happening, and I think it's going to hit us worse than it did the last time, judging because of the millage rate that we're getting, and I don't think we're going to see the growth in charter schools that we had before. So I'm thinking that even the half rate might not be enough. And that's where I stand on it.
Jane?
Well, I look at this and I see growth as well, and I do not want us to shortcut ourselves in any maintenance projects or anything that we have in our 5-year plan. Those are important things to do. I think we're going to be building wings on Venice High School before long, a 400-student additional capacity if things continue, because we are 2,100 students there as capacity, and we're at 22, I think, as school began to start, and we expect more people may move in. It's a great school and a great place to be, and our other schools are getting crowded as well. So I see the high school as being one of the first impacts, because if we did reorganize our elementary schools, we do have some capacity. I think of Wilkinson Elementary for one, which we really underutilize, and we all are working on that, I know. But basically for me, if we have another 2-year moratorium, then what happens at the end of 2 years? Do we then go in at the full pop, $7,800 or something comparable to that? Is that not a hard pill to swallow? If we looked at going back and letting this sunset and going back to the $2,032 that we had before, we could still look at that in 2 years and see if we needed to increase it without doing another study, correct? And that would give us some money and some cushion to buy land and do whatever we need to do to get started with the process, and then take the majority of the cost and do our COPs that we've done in the past successfully. We're well under our threshold. We're well under the amount that we need to spend, and that's always been what I thought was a starting point. I live in an older neighborhood in Venice, and we've had several lots that have been there forever, and 3 houses are now being built infill in that neighborhood. And I really think that we do have to deal with growth, and I like growth. Listen, I worked for the Home Builders Association. All of you know that at one point. And I know what this industry has suffered, and it is a lot. I had people on my board coming in who were filing bankruptcy and losing their jobs, and it was a horrible time, just a horrible time. But that last 10-year stretch is really atypical of what we have seen in the past and hopefully what we'll ever see again. I always worried that, we were kind of like ground zero here, so a lot of people didn't see things as bad as we have seen them. And the banks, of course, are still an issue as far as I'm concerned. But basically, those developers and those people that were dealing with cash were okay. They went dormant for a while, and they've come back stronger than ever, and I think that's wonderful. That shows good stewardship. But I really think that we do have an issue of growth, and I really am not ready to go to those higher numbers. It would be on the low end for me because I think that's prudent and that's fair. Then we have some money, and it's not, these are passed on to the home owner. These are passed on to the person that buys the home, and I get that. And it isn't equitable in that, big homes that are being built, and we know the one that's over on St. Armand's that's being built on 2 lots right now. I think maybe we could have that person pay the whole big part of that. But at any rate, those are issues that we're not addressing. And I don't want to workforce housing in the lower end. I say no, and I agree with Frank. Condominiums and multifamily, that probably is where we do have a lot of people, because I know a lot of young families that can't afford to buy a house. They are really in the and don't want to either. I might add, they don't want the maintenance, but a lot of young families are in that situation. So I don't know where we get our numbers, but I think it needs to be beefed up on multi-family.
One of the things I'd like to talk about, Shirley, is that directly for Philippi, you yourself said that Philippi Shores has a lot of kids that are being bussed in, and that's what's causing the overcrowding at Philippi Shores. Maybe we need to look at choice at some of our schools that are overpopulated, because that would solve that problem right off. I believe that a lot of the homes being built right now are for villas and condominiums. I don't see them as being single-family homes, and the ones that are being built, they're too expensive for our families to be able to afford them. So I can't tell you which way I'm going to vote until this afternoon, because I don't know. That's why I'm listening to you all, because I have my own thoughts, and I have my own script that I've written out, and I've done, but I still have questions. I have questions about the credibility of the number of students that are actually coming into the district and the number of schools that we actually need. And again, there's a development that's down south that Michael's talking to a guy down there, and his whole development is with seniors. There's no kids at all in his development. So I just don't. I'm having a problem, because I can argue for both sides right now. I certainly would not be in favor of the 50% that's being proposed.
Well, and I agree with you, Caroline, on what you said about the study, because as somebody who's lived here my whole life, I've seen Sarasota, and everybody knows that Sarasota's gotten more and more expensive. And in the next 10 years, Sarasota is going to get even more and more expensive. Does that mean we're going to have, as Tyndall Oliver is assuming, that the growth of kids will be the same as they've been in the past, when you could live in Sarasota for $200,000? I don't think you can live in Sarasota you sure can't have a new house built for $200,000 in Sarasota County. But my biggest concern with this whole idea of this tax, and I use tax, I mean, the county used to have something called a occupational license. Now they call it rightfully a business tax. A tax is a tax. If you have to pay it, I think it's a tax. I've lived in Sarasota probably longer than maybe one person in this room. My kids, who were all born here, have lived probably longer than the majority of the people in this room. If they build a house tomorrow, if I build a house tomorrow, I would, well, not tomorrow, but if this passed, I would have to pay an educational construction tax or whatever we're going to call it. I'd have to pay a road, even though they're changing. I have to pay a road impact fee, even though I've been driving on those roads for 46 years or something like that. I have to pay a library impact fee. I have to pay all the impact fees that the county charges as well as this. And I've done that a couple of times. It is not, it leaves a very, very bad taste in your mouth because I'm not sending any more kids to Sarasota County schools. My kids who already have kids in school would have to pay this and the other impact fees if they build a house. On the flip side of that, there's people that have moved here, sent their kids from elementary school through high school, have never paid an impact fee. It's just, you said, use the word equitable. To me, that's not equitable. We're trying to raise money to build new schools, which we have to do. I just have a real problem philosophically with charging the people that are moving here. They could be 70 years old. They could be moving here from Ohio. They build a house in Sarasota County, a single-family home, they're going to pay an impact fee. Somebody else moves here, buys a house in Gulfgate with 4 kids, sends their kids all the way through from elementary school to 12th grade. They're never going to pay an impact fee. That house in Gulfgate never paid an impact fee because we didn't have them back then. So, you know, I'm sorry. I wish I could just, I mean, you know, I had to, this is how, I had an email, I think you all got the same email. It was a guy from South County. He said, how could we be so foolish to pass up free money? Because what I've said before, the fairest tax is always a tax somebody else pays. So how could we be foolish enough to pass up free money? And I tell you what, that just really got my blood boiling. There's no such thing. And he compared it to grants and government, other, you know, federal government funding and private grants and all this other kind of stuff. It's a tax. It's a $4,000 tax, a $7,000 tax, a $2,000 tax, whatever the board decides to do, it's a tax. And to call it free money, I think just shows you, and also shows you what a position this board's in, because I don't know about you guys, but I've gotten very few emails that said, don't pay it or don't collect it. Which is, you know, one of the things, and I saw that quote again the other day in the paper, that, you know, sometimes you just say things and you don't think about quite the way it was going to come out when I said I'm not running again. And I felt like I don't have to worry about what the development community thinks about what I'm going to do, or the anti-growth people are going to, on my vote. I'm not going to collect any money from any of those sides in another election, so I can be comfortable voting the way that almost 60 years of living in Sarasota County makes my conscience feel that I should vote. So sorry I have to explain that and take the time to do that, but anyway. Anything else on this subject? So I think we'll talk about it again at 3 o'clock if I'm not shortly after there. We're adjourned.
You good or no?
I don't know. I see what you